This meeting is being recorded.
Yeah, and I think we give people like 2 minutes to start jumping in. We've got about 6 people with us so far. Okay, looks like we've given everybody about 2 minutes to join. If you guys want to take it away, whenever.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to this joint challenge webinar for the FRST Challenge and the Commanding Tech Challenge to provide some background on the FirstNET Authority and some of the research we've been working on and some of our collaboration efforts. So appreciate you taking the time today to participate in this webinar. So we wanted to start today just to provide some background about FirstNET, the authority, just for your reference. It's been a long road and a long journey since we've started this effort. As some of you may know, it really came to a spotlight back on September 11th, 2001, where issues that had been going on in public safety communications were really brought to the forefront with the challenges the responders faced that day. And those issues were captured in that 9/11 Commission report, which then identified gaps in emergency communications. And there was a recommendation to create a single nationwide network to try to alleviate those communication problems by public safety entities. Public safety then took that report and spearheaded several efforts to fulfill the 9/11 Commission's recommendations. And eventually they were successful and they united their efforts when Congress created the First Responder Network Authority and the network back in 2012. So 10 years ago, we were created and codified in Congress, and we were given some resources to develop and build this network across the country. So fast forward, each of the states committed and signed on to opt into this network to have our authority work to create this nationwide network, and we partnered with AT&T as part of that effort to actually operate and build this network on our behalf as we oversee their efforts. But our big role as we continue, other than just those oversight activities, is to consult with public safety and industry as well as academia to understand what their operational needs are and new technologies, and how can we best combine those two to meet those gaps that public safety has, to meet our mandate from Congress and meet those expectations that public safety has for us on their behalf, to advocate for them to move technology forward so they can do their jobs in a more efficient and safer manner. Go ahead to the next slide, Travis. So as we continue to move forward, we spend a tremendous amount of energy in the authority, like efforts with PSCR and all of our outreach opportunities that we do year after year, where we meet with thousands of engagements with thousands of public safety officials to understand how they're leveraging LTE and communications to respond to and recover and operate at emergencies and disasters, understand their operational needs and any gaps that they have. And we identify those and we put those in a prioritized roadmap of how we dissect and look to solve these problems. We also, at the same time, coordinate with industry and academia, as I've mentioned before, where we work with our partners in both of those areas to help us progress forward. A lot of the activity that PSCR does also falls into this effort where they're looking way out in the future of those technologies that can use to help us solve these gaps. And what we do is in the short term, we identify those types of technologies that'll help public safety solve those gaps, fill those operational needs. And if we see that there's an area that we can invest some of our resources in, then we'll do that through our reinvestment process, through our board, to accelerate and put items in the street for public safety use rapidly. And since we've started our reinvestment opportunities over the last several years, we've invested in 3 major items to date. One was we enhanced our deployable fleet by adding more deployables and a different variety of deployable assets based on, again, public safety's feedback. We've also invested in technology to move us to 5G network capabilities, where we were initially conceived and built out as a 4G network. And the third was to address those in-building limitations and challenges that public safety had by providing an opportunity for them to get access to free agency deployed RAN devices to put into their facilities. Go ahead to the next slide. So while we were doing all of those things, our partner alongside of us have been doing a tremendous amount of work out in the public safety sector across the United States. And this slide here just depicts the current state of our momentum that we've been doing since we've had that contract with AT&T. So basically 4 years ago, after the core was built, we started to roll out the network and have subscribers join to the FirstNET network, which is its own standalone network, different from all the other subscribers. And over that time, you can see that we've have over 23,000 public safety agencies and organizations that are using this network to provide some level of service to their organization. We have over 4 million FirstNet connections, and what we identify a connection is all of those different SIM cards. So the different types of devices that are out there that Travis will talk to in a second, each one of those is a connection, right? And there's many public safety responders that may operate with more than one connection. They may have a watch and a smartphone, and then they have a tablet in their car. As you see, that would be 3 connections. You also see on this graphic that band 14 coverage completion is at around 95%. When we had that commitment with those states 5 years ago, we committed to each state that we were going to build out an area that had band 14 coverage within each of their states by adding band 14 capacity to existing sites and then adding many other sites to provide coverage where public safety saw that there was a gap and a need. So out of those committed areas that we said we were going to cover, we're in excess of 95% of covering those. And actually, we exceeded in many other states where we've covered more capacity than what we committed to. And then you also see there's a couple items here on deployments. I mentioned deployables earlier on. We have over 150 different types of deployables. So the network can be where public safety needs it when they need it. So if that's in a remote area where they typically don't have coverage, or that's in an area where coverage has been somehow degraded or gone away based on some type of disaster or impact to the network, we have these stationed throughout the country to provide that access. And we've done that over 1,000 times just in 2022. where we've provided solutions where there was some type of issue. And then when we talk about devices, and then I'll turn it right over to Travis after that. When we started this effort 5 years ago, there were very, very few devices that could operate on band 14, and none of them were certified to work on the FirstNet network. And in just that short period of time over the last 5 years, we now have an excess of 525 different devices that have been certified to operate on our network, and most of those operate on band 14. So I'll turn over to Travis to really talk more about what we've learned from public safety and what we see some future opportunities with devices specifically. Go ahead, Travis.
Thanks, Michael. And howdy, y'all. My name is Travis Hull with the First Responder Network Authority. I've been here just over 4 years. I'm the user experience domain lead within the roadmap development division. Some of you might know one of my favorite people, Randy Kerr, who's also on the roadmap team. He's been working, I think, some of these challenges along the way. He's also on the on the presentation here today, so if you have any questions, he can dive into it as well. So as Michael had mentioned, we've been thinking a lot about devices and utilization of those types of broadband tools on the public safety broadband network, and how first responders and agencies overall are using them in the field. So we want to take a step back and do some of that research, thinking about these devices, how they get used, how they get deployed, and what agencies are really thinking about when they're getting these into the hands of the responders in the field. So about a year ago, we started putting together kind of one of our programs is really start thinking about FirstNet and how do we put the power of FirstNet in the hands of public safety users, and really thinking about it from an operational standpoint, and how do we meet those operational needs to get them out in the field and really make it an effective solution. So as we started to think about overall what puts that device in somebody's hands, be it a LMR handheld radio, be it a smartphone, be it a tablet, so many options are out there, and getting deployments on the network is, as Michael mentioned, there's over 500 devices that are available on FirstNet. Trying to get our heads wrapped around what individuals are thinking and teams are thinking when they're starting to choose and use these devices. So as we kind of went through this, we kind of put together the objectives here that we've got broken down. I'll just hit a few of them. As a note, this is a presentation that I usually give in about an hour, 90 minutes. So we're going to blast through it in less than 30. So if there's any questions along the way, please put it in the chat. I think it's getting monitored, or reach out to us afterwards. Happy to dive into any specific areas in further detail in the future. We're looking to see what those factors influence these types of solutions that agencies are using and deploying, because there's a difference between procurement and effective deployment, right? We can buy things for teams all day long. If it's effective, they're going to adopt it and use it. And if they don't like it, they're going to chuck it in the backseat and forget about it. And really understand, again, their use of these solutions during these public safety operations. And as Michael said, our job is to identify these gaps and opportunities and think about how FirstNet might play a role in overall getting these solutions in the field and maybe resolving some of the problems that are out there. And then kind of the last bullet, as we start thinking future, what's ahead for these responders? What capabilities can FirstNet, these solutions, bring to these teams and their operations in the future? We understand year to two down the road, okay, we've got these devices in there and they're really starting to learn and adopt what FirstNet is. But as that adoption happens, getting over the horizon, what these real tools might look like when they're really utilizing broadband networks to get the information they need. So how do we go about doing this? So it all started about almost a year and a half ago. So put it in your mindset, we were still well within the pandemic. Everything was still happening virtually in webinars. So we need to build out this whole entire program so we could do it virtually, but also with the expectation we could eventually evolve it into an in-person type of scenario, which actually did happen, which was pretty fantastic because we got to hit both sides. So we developed a pre-questionnaire so that we could have an opportunity to reach out to individuals and agencies, try and get contact and information from them. And our pre-questionnaire would kind of help us, I'll call it, weed out those who weren't really device-centric, didn't have a role in either procuring, utilizing, or identifying what devices and applications get used in the field. And then from there, we were able to pull some of the data, but then also start bringing in individuals for these virtual and then in-person engagements and discussions. Then following all of that, we sent them a follow-up survey that actually gave us some quantitative data so we could balance both the qualitative data we were getting in these discussions and engagements and bounce it against some of the quantitative, just kind of see how the two marry up. So we kind of hit both ends of it. So as noted, we hit through July of 2021 to December of last year. We wrapped up, hit 127 different stakeholders, all from our public safety groups, which was really nice, both because we had identified individuals through relationships that we had from the FirstNet Authority, but also in ways we hit individuals that had really no relationship from FirstNet. So we get the whole, I'll call it the spectrum of those who were familiar with the solutions that we're presenting today to the people who were completely unfamiliar with it. And also wanted to make sure that we hit all disciplines, law, fire, EMS, ECC, kind of noted here in the icons, but also the full range of the command staff are really making a lot of those command decisions, but also the boots on the ground type responder, because they're the ones with it in their pocket and they're really making it work and deploy in the field. So moving on. What we did, it was kind of interesting as this evolved. We initially started with multiple questions, and in the end, once we started deploying this in the field after going through multiple iterations, both with our internal subject matter experts and again externally, we went and we asked 2 questions during these engagements. And you may kind of think, okay, what kind of real information did you get from 2 questions? Well, easily enough, the webinars were fully an hour, easily filled in with the time and turned into actually some really good discussions. The in-person engagements, we had a little more flexibility in time, and they easily turned into at least 90 minutes, in some cases, 2 hours of really discussions. The first question we asked is what we have here, which actually really turned into some really interesting information sharing along the way. The question was, on the left-hand side of the screen, you have your traditional iPhone and Samsung type of device. On the right-hand side, you see these ruggedized kind of purpose-built devices that are available to public safety operators today. As we've heard that they want ruggedized devices, can survive in, like Michael had mentioned, IDLH or really ruggedized environments, can go through anything. You could almost pound a nail in with it. This is what we want. This is what we're going to use. We pulled back the data and said, okay, what's getting used on FirstNet today? And you know what? It was all iPhones. It was all Samsung devices. And we're trying to figure out, okay, why is there the dichotomy of what we're hearing for what people want versus what they're deploying? So that was the first question. Why do people think that is? And so we would then have a conversation around it. And then also would evolve into, okay, as we start thinking about these things in operational utility, what roles do these types of devices play in those types of operations? And we'll be providing you guys that data along the way, but I'm sure some of you are already kind of thinking, okay, why are certain choices made there? Then the second choice was kind of a blue sky discussion. We wanted them to kind of say, okay, wipe the slate clean, knowing that everybody knows that coverage is king. You have to be in an area where this broadband device can operate in order for it to be effective. Okay, let's put that aside as it's being worked on, as Michael mentioned, some of the solutions we've already put downrange. Within the device and some of the accessories itself, what do you think you need to make this an effective solution? And kind of opening that up to any kind of crazy pants idea. It was actually really kind of fun to banter around the room. Initially, you'd kind of hear about, okay, this is the problem I had within the last 2 days, the last 2 weeks. Okay, how we might start thinking about some things to address those, but then now start thinking, okay, let's get over the horizon as these types of solutions are getting deployed and the effectivity of operations of the team. What might this public next-gen device really include in this kind of blue sky wide space opportunity? And again, we'll get into some of that too. But as you can see, these kind of open-ended discussions, one created the opportunity to get all kinds of data in along the way, but also created the challenge, so much data to sift through, that the teams, as we were kind of pulling through the data at the end of it, had, I think, over 250 some odd hours of transcripts that we had to go through based on these engagements and discussions, plus all the quantitative data along the way. But it's been really pretty interesting to see as it goes through. And as mentioned, the final survey that went out, everybody had the opportunity that had gone through the engagements to get online, do this 10-ish minute survey. It was a discrete choice model type of survey was what the punchline was with some other information. We also have made it available to some people who said, well, I'd like to be part of the survey, but I don't have time to sit through the webinar or the in-person. We still wanted to be able to get some of the quantitative data from them. So we've got kind of a hybrid there as well. All right, so let's see if we can start getting into the findings. So as mentioned, there was a lot of data to go through because we had the initial survey, we had the qualitative discussions, and then quantitative at the back. And we'll kind of take you through the entire, I'll call it, journey of it all. And you can kind of compare and contrast some of the things that we heard along the way. And as we start thinking about the challenge that your teams are working on about responders, as they're working indoors, as they're working in these rugged environments, maybe keep that in the back of your mind, and I'll try to kind of fill in some information there too, of how some of this technologies of what they're saying they wanted and why they're using these commercial technologies in some of these environments. It was actually kind of fascinating. So in that initial screener survey, we had that pre-question that basically said, was an open-ended, what would you change about your current commercial smartphone to make it kind of a public safety device? We got multiple inputs, and we kind of broke these out into some of the different domains that we have within the authority. So within the roadmap group, some context, understanding there is so much to think about when it comes to broadband devices and deployment of the network. We had to break it into different categories. Voice communications, one that Randy's in charge of, is situational awareness. We have secure information exchange, coverage and capacity. We have core, and of course, the one I'm in charge of with user experience. So different color combinations here. You can see we actually broke those up in the different domains. So the blue being kind of the overall coverage and capacity, really. Again, that reliable network and the stay connected, and the failover. So that's interesting. Responders are really thinking about, they don't want to think about if they're on LMR, they're on LTE, they're on SATCOM, they're on the string between two cans. They just know when they hit that magic button to make their voice go out or to send data, it's going to go out and it's going to get to who they want it to. So really thinking about that, okay, how do we make it so that when they want that information out, how do we get it out, and the technologies involved with that? Multifunctionality, seamless connectivity between push-to-talk, LMR devices. Again, thinking about this one device that kind of does it all for them, and integration with their CAD systems. The one that comes up all the time in user experiences, of course, battery life. We all live it in our commercial world. As we're starting to think about, my smartphone lasts most of the day, then I have to charge it at night. Thinking that they're operating in these environments in 10 to 12-hour shifts, and they're sharing information along the way, that battery is getting just annihilated, particularly if GPS is active. The other two I'll kind of hit real quick and then we'll move on, is really some of the secure things about thinking of security and network access. We did have IT teams on here and thinking about the information that's getting pushed along, be it HIPAA, CGIS, other types of acronyms, is that information needs to get from A to B in a secure fashion because you've got patient information going back and forth. And then kind of in the middle on the right-hand side, we start thinking about these rugged environments that they're operating in, right? We've got, potentially fuels are out there. You've got streams of liquid, getting shot by firefighters going from A to B, hot environments, smoky environments. I'm in search and rescue, and I'm running through the stakes here in Washington State, so they're getting beat up as well. How these devices survive those types of environment, it's a very important to them withstand that harsh environment, fire, heat, water, salt water, etc. And of course, that last one, which is also one to think about, how do we manipulate this device without having to pick it up to transmit? How do we get that information out there? All right. So as we started thinking about the purchasing trends, again, this is the question of why do we see people are using these commercial smartphones versus ruggedized? And these are the themes that we really hit upon. And I would say in 99.999% of it, familiarity was usually the first thing that came out. People are used to using that smartphone, be it an iPhone or a Samsung device. First thing in the morning, they're checking the news, they're checking their emails, playing Angry Birds with their kids. This is the device that they're used to because it's the operating system and the interfaces from the phone itself that they're typically used to using all the time. Return on investment, we'll hit that a little bit. The evolution of technology, the devices and their operational environments, we kind of hinted at that, thinking about how it might work. And in some cases, these ruggedized cases are good enough. And I think this is interesting, the quote we have on there on the right hand side, it's these ruggedized devices are good for 1% of their efforts that they do, and we'll get into that a little bit, thinking about the whole scope of operations, particularly in fire. What is really that they're up to, the 99% boredom and 1% sheer excitement? How do these devices play their roles into it? And you guys might be hearing some of that as you're working with the fire teams. So let's think about the familiarity thing. Again, it doesn't matter, the quote here, and it doesn't matter what age you are, and you can pick up an iPhone and it's good to go. I think a lot of us joke that my 8-year-old nephew probably knows more about how to get in the ins and outs of my iPhone than I might. And then the fun and challenges of working with my mom, who's in her 70s, of getting her to work through the phone. You know, it's easy to get her to manipulate the apps, manipulate the data. The interfaces are actually really good. But sometimes it's just getting in the minutia of what you want it to get into. So again, it's really responders have that familiarity with these existing technologies and the interactions with these devices. You know, we've kind of talked in some cases, and Michael can chime in if he needs to, but many cases, the responders in the field with these big brick radios with multiple different channels and zones, wonderful buttons for programming it in the field. Typically, they're using either the first channel 1 or channel 16 because it's on the itchy end of the rotary knob. That's where their happy and safe places are. But they get maybe an hour of training on those, and then off in the field you go with them. When we're speaking with these users of iPhones and broadband devices in the field, typically get zero training on because they're already so familiar with it. They may need to walk through briefly through the app and what they're trying to do with it, but the iPhone itself, its interfaces, off they go.
Yeah, that was a good point, Travis. Right, public safety, typically when they operate in the field, most of it comes from their training and muscle memory. So what they're used to doing, what they do most of the time. So as we roll out these new technologies, we always find that we need to really prioritize and spend more time on the training component and the why piece of this, so that they're more successful using the product in the field.
Yeah, I think muscle memory, that's where the biggest key is, right? The other note about familiarity is that compared to these traditional LMR radios, the, well, I'll say iPhone or Samsung devices are pretty ubiquitous in the commercial world. If I, as a responder, go out, break my phone, it's easy enough, usually my IT shop or radio shop back at the station, get it swapped out pretty readily. Or worst case scenario, I'll walk into an AT&T store, get it swapped out, and I'm off and I'm back on the road. Where these big brick radios, there's usually a little bit more involved with that. All right. So as we start thinking about devices and operational environments, okay, and thinking about matching the device into the operational role and some of these mission critical type capabilities. Again, as we start thinking about the whole scope of operations, and I kind of mentioned fire in the previous case. When we see the smoke, the lights and sirens, that's typically what's on TV most of the time. That's really where our focus goes because these are the most challenging environments. And as an engineer, we start thinking about, okay, how do I really survive those? Typically, you know, maybe less than 3% of their operations. So a very small fraction of what they're actually doing. So we're building this really rugged device that they're going to carry every day for doing everything for 3% of the overall operation. So we start thinking about these smartphones and tablets and the other operational roles such as pre-planning, mission pre-planning, as mentioned, some of the roles of, you know, patient care, EMS runs, those types of things. Okay, now it starts to make sense that there's a broadband device that, you know, might be a little more, I'll call it fragile compared to these brick radios. So we have to think about the whole scope, but then also the whole level of the operators doing it. You have your command staff whose day-to-day operations don't necessarily take them into those kind of smoke-filled environments where they're in these meetings just like all of us right now, and the smartphone is going to do the job most of the time. And even some of the teams, as they're operating in the field, right, it's not necessarily an individual responder, but in the fire world, they're operating as a group, and specific individuals can get issued a tablet, whereas the different radios, as they go into these environments, you know, everybody's going to get one. So we need to really start thinking about the whole thing. And even in the law enforcement type world, the quote there that everybody's on the phone, but no one is on the radio until the bullets start flying. And start thinking about these mission critical scenarios and how we get information out, because there's so much data that we share from our phones, either kind of in a private or one-to-one scenario, or really as they're kind of clearing the radio for other traffic, that information can be shared over the phone. And I'll kind of hit that in the next slide here as we kind of talk through device and operational use. Kind of broke them into two buckets here. On the left-hand side, we're thinking about the LMR radios themselves, and the right-hand side of the kind of these broadband devices, and really kind of bucketizing in a way of how we heard responders are using them in the field today. So as we start thinking about the LMR radio, again, it's that used for voice communications, right? There are some radios out there that'll give you GPS location, particularly when you hit the button, but really it's used for voice, and that's how they're going to carry out that conversation. And it's kind of a one-to-many communication. Yeah, you'll have your kind of one-to-one chat along the way, and maybe you'll switch to a different channel along the way. But really, when you're communicating the whole group back to dispatch, that's happening over the radio. And also kind of mentioned right when the bullets start flying, this is really those mission critical type scenarios. You're not going to use this LMR radio to ask your buddy, what does he want to order for lunch, right? It's going to be really those kind of critical communications to keep it clear and be professional over the radio. And again, it's going to be this really that preferred device when you're wearing PPE, the heavy gloves, particularly in the fire environment, with limited dexterity, trying to talk through an SCBA, some kind of mask that really gives you that opportunity to get through these type of urgent communications. And then comparing to that on the broadband devices on the right, we start thinking about data, and how that information goes through. Yeah, we're going to have voice comms over there, but most of the time it's going to be a text, location information sharing, emails, again, whatever.
Being recorded.
I think I got dropped in my back now.
Yep, I can see you.
Yes.
Okay, cool. I think I got the screen back up. Sorry about that. So again, as we start thinking about broadband devices, using this for kind of one-to-one communications, informal address, maybe sensitive content that goes out along the way, again, because you have patient information, maybe information about minors that is going out. And again, non-essential communication that needs to either go between an individual responder to his teammates or something like that. And again, we're using it from these kind of day-to-day tasks and kind of keeping that LMR network clear along the way. So then kind of finally, as we went through the blue sky general themes, here's the 5 that kind of really topped out, and it actually kind of summed up both of them along the way. And I think the one that really hits along as you guys are thinking about some of your challenges, really that desire for simplicity. This came up all the time, and don't want to oversimplify it, so to speak. But as operators are using in the field, they want that device that is almost transparent to them. We hear that the muscle memory and they're used to hitting the big button. That's just because it's something they're used to doing all the time. The technology is transparent, even though they're hitting the button. It's not something they want to need to interact with. It's particularly as we're thinking about first responders as the sensor in the field and pushing the data back out. We don't want to have them, working around workarounds or this, that, and the other in order to activate things. As soon as that information becomes transparent to them, but gives them the data that they need, then you're starting to get an effective solution, because it's really giving them the data either to themselves or back to incident command or the administrator or to the staff that needs it in the back to make those types of decisions. Again, they don't want to be thinking about care and feeding of it so much. And again, that's part of the reason why they say battery life all the time, because now it's something they have to be thinking about. The redundancy versus converged devices was a really interesting one. We went into this thinking that a converged device would be better for the public safety user, because they don't necessarily want to use an LMR radio, have a smartphone, have their personal smartphone, have a tablet, because they've got to carry all of this on their person, usually when they're in the field, plus whatever they need to keep it charged and happy along the way. What came out of in kind of a 50-50 overall response was that there is some desire out there for redundancy, that they don't necessarily mind carrying that handheld radio and the smartphone, because one, a coverage thing, they know where the LMR network is covering them, and they know where the broadband network may be covering them, so they go in and out of that. But also in the unlikely scenario where one of these devices gets damaged to the point it can't operate, they've got another device they can fail over to. Batteries die, something like that. So it gives them that opportunity to go to another communication option should one fail on them. So again, it was an interesting 50-50 in the feedback, because some people, again, want to simplify into one device, less things to think about, less things to worry about. But again, now there's some thoughts about redundancy, and particularly as we're starting to think about the challenges of different tools are using data to show responder location. So my smartphone might be putting one bit of information out for GPS location, and then my GPS, like my Garmin, is squawking out somewhere else. How do these two compare, and who's getting the data on the back end? How do we simplify that also on the consumption side versus some redundancy? So thinking about some of that's kind of a long way, and it's actually something we might dig into in the future. I've kind of beat up the center one here as we start thinking about the full scope of operations. It's really, again, it's from both the fire or foot pursuit, but it's really also the administrative stuff they've got to do day to day. The other one was interesting was the access to cutting edge technologies, particularly when we start thinking about smartphones, broadband devices. The $1,000 smartphone is relatively low compared to the LMR radios that they're using day to day. And even, certain programs, they get it at much lower cost than that. We're all familiar with some of the promotions that come along there, but it allows them to keep pace with some of these technologies and as they evolve. A good example is, the iPhone, what we got 14 now, has now some SATCOM ability to provide SOS warnings should a person get lost, right? That's something really new. So that's really interesting. And it's going to be kind of fascinating to see how this affects public safety operations as we move forward. It's particularly as we start thinking about Starlink, LEO, and these other technologies that are getting both voice communication but responder location information out there. Of course, it's a challenge when you're operating inside of a building because SATCOM doesn't necessarily work with a roof above your head. So how do we, again, as we're operating inside of these other challenged environments, be it parking garage, inside of a building itself, large warehouses where XY locations particularly critical to these responders, how do we get it out? So it's fascinating. The last one, I think, also one of the good takeaways for y'all is let the responders be responders. As we start thinking again, the idea of simplicity, when your responder goes through the academy, finally swears in and gets deployed in the field, there's that desire and hope to work and serve their communities. As we deploy these technologies, let's make sure that that technology, again, is transparent and helps them serve the communities that they want to. It doesn't become that barrier as they're trying to have that conversation during a traffic stop, so that everybody has the best opportunity and scenario that they can when these types of things are happening. Let them really be the responder that they wanted to be when they really started out, and make the technology support that. The last slide that I've got here will be presenting about kind of the final survey that we did in perceptions of data, or sorry, perception of value. We were really thinking in some of the quantitative about how people deploy devices, both in their at the individual responder level, but also at the agency level, and like the willingness to pay money. There's kind of an assumption that everyone, of course, wants a 99-cent device, even though it might be a few generations back. But as some of the data we pulled, and happy to go through it, if somebody wants a little more deep dive into it, there is an acceptable threshold that people are willing to pay this $299 to $599 if the device provides the value that they're looking at, such as location information, different types of manufacturers and models, location scenarios X, Y, and Z, right? That kind of thing, as examples. So there is a willingness to pay a little bit more, and we understand that as consumers, if it's giving me the value I want and it's a newer technology, I'm going to step up and pay that a little bit extra amount. And also, it's interesting, agencies are willing to accept these commercial off-the-shelf devices and start to think about deploying them in the field because of some of the things we talked about. But also, as we start to put otter boxes on them, they're performing pretty well in these rugged and scary devices. And the last kind of perceived value, as we start thinking about it too, is that return on investment when it comes to training. As Michael mentioned, little or no training time is really required to get responders to use this technology in the field because they're so familiar with the operating system and interfaces. With that, I think I'm passing it along to Gigi to talk about collaboration with the FirstNET Authority. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Travis. Hello, everyone. My name is Gigi Mamaropoulou. I'm a senior advisor within the Industry and Academia Engagement Division here in FirstNET Authority. I've been with FirstNET Authority for a little over 6 years. In the next few minutes, I wanted to make you aware of some collaboration opportunities with FirstNET Authority post the challenges by briefly going over some of the future engagement options with FirstNET Authority. So, Travis, are you sharing? Can you share slide 20 or 19? Travis?
Yes, I was trying to clean it up.
Okay, there you are. Okay, so once the challenges are completed, and if you choose to continue participating in the FirstNet ecosystem via FirstNet Authority, you can visit the site that's shown on this slide, doing business with FirstNet. There you will find a link for the vendor meeting request form. Please complete that and submit that to the authority, and someone from FirstNet Authority will get back to you to schedule a meeting to discuss the progress of your product and solutions, as well as the status of it, the commercial readiness of it. And then once we conduct this intro call, we can mutually identify the next steps for collaboration opportunities. And this may include a market research meeting with wider FirstNet Authority. As Travis and Mike mentioned, we have a public safety engagement division that consists of representatives from police, EMS, fire, E911, and so forth. So that is an opportunity. We can conduct a wider market research meeting with FirstNet Authority. That's one of the next steps. In addition, we could conduct evaluation of your product and solutions, whether in the Boulder lab or in the field. So this will be determined, based after our intro call and after we both mutually agree on the next steps. Travis, can you go to the next slide? Thanks. So in addition to that, FirstNet has partnered with EDA, NIST PSCR, Rapid SOS, Responder Corporation, Orleans Parish Communications District, Western Fire Chiefs Association, and the state of New Hampshire to launch a platform called R2 Network. This is a free-to-use, self-sustaining community platform to connect first responders, industry vendors, tech innovators, and also to provide resources to public safety entities and innovators and the industry partners. So as shown here, R2 network consists of 3 components. First one is the R2 Learn. This one has the resources to educate the stakeholders. Next one is the R2 Portal. This one offers the online collaboration forum. And then finally, R2 Connect, which is an online community for first responders and innovators to discover, share, and adopt best practices for new public safety, new and emerging public safety focused technologies. These are a couple of options for you to stay engaged and continue participating in the FirstNet ecosystem once you complete the PSCR challenges. That's all I have right now. Thank you. Travis, do you want to go to the Q&A?
Yeah, that was the last slide I have. I didn't know. Yeah, Michael, if you were the one leading the Q&A on that one, I'll go back to the top.
Yeah, Haley, or anybody that's attending, certainly entertain any questions anyone has.
Yep, there's no questions in the Q&A right now.
So hearing no questions, if anybody has any as we go forward in the future, either through Sunny through the first challenge or through the Commanding Tech Challenge, you can certainly connect with us and be glad to answer any questions or provide any additional information in the future about anything we covered today or anything else that has to do with FirstNet or the FirstNet Authority. I appreciate everybody's time.
Hey, it looks like there's a couple of questions in the Q&A.
Yep, I can go ahead and read them if you want me to.
Okay.
Yeah, so David says, what work is FirstNet doing for building responder tracking?
Randy, are you on and available to come off mute?
Yep, let me try. Can you hear me okay?
Yep,
Yep.
gotcha.
All right, perfect. Thanks. As Travis said earlier, I'm Randy Kerr. I'm one of the roadmap domain leads for the situational awareness domain, and location-based services and location tracking falls within our situational awareness domain. And that is one of our areas of focus for situational awareness. There's currently one FirstNet branded solution that provides responder tracking indoors, inside buildings. And that particular solution is located on the FirstNet.com website, and you can kind of take a look at that. It's a solution called Response for FirstNet by Intrepid Networks, and not particularly promoting that particular individual solution, but if you're interested in learning a little bit more about it, there's a good bit of detail there and on the Intrepid Network site. We also continue to work with our partners at AT&T about expanding the availability for different location solutions, including the ability to track responders indoors. And the interesting thing, the First Responder Smart Tracking Challenge, that's one of the two challenges represented here today, that entire challenge revolves around the ability to track responder location indoors, inside different buildings, in different environments without any sort of pre-deployed infrastructure. So obviously it's a pretty well recognized challenge, and therefore we're excited to see what some of the work that comes out of the FRST challenge as we go forward into this current phase 4 and as the different teams move on to phase 5. So always looking to learn more about the technology as it evolves. It's definitely a rapidly evolving area with different aspects of tracking responders indoors, and so hopefully that helps. But also, continuously engaging with the public safety community as we have different events and opportunities for engagement to learn about the evolving needs of responders as they operate inside buildings and outside of their vehicles.
All right. Thanks for that, Randy. So our next question is, as we understand, the first challenge participants can only engage after the challenge has ended. Is that true? And is there any connection possible as the challenge is ongoing to get feedback?
I'm not sure. Hey, it's Travis. Not being part of the challenge, I'm not sure if one of the administrators of the challenge is on and can answer that, because I think that's kind of their area, though. I think Gigi hinted at it. We might have to come back to you guys on that one, unless there's somebody who can answer that.
Yeah, we might need a little clarification on what type of engagement we're talking about, but so we may need to interact offline with that one, unless Dr. Kirkley wants to chime in also.
Yeah, I would just say that it's probably a situational decision we need to make so that there's not unfair treatment between teams. So if we did something for one team, we'd want to do it for all the teams. I think if you reach out to me or the folks here at FirstNet, we can figure out if the request makes sense or not, or if it's something that would need to wait because of preferential treatment.
Okay, and so our next question is, how do we receive more info about your user research?
Yeah, so not sure what the methodology of getting a hold of Travis Hull here at the FirstNet Authority. Happy to get into any more of the information with you. So either through Dr. Kirkley, I think, has got connected through the Authority group, or any of the Authority team, just give me a shout, or you can find me on LinkedIn. It's easy enough. Happy to provide information along the way.
Okay, and then we have, what is the Band 14 coverage at Muscatatuck Urban Training Center in Indiana?
Yeah.
I was thinking about that one. Yeah. Who is that? You?
I don't know that we know
Yeah.
exactly what that is. I don't know that I can answer that right here on the call, but we'll make sure as we work with the challenge organizers for that specific engagement that's going to happen, that the coverage is certainly there to facilitate what needs to happen at that facility as part of the challenge. But I don't know the answer here today.
Okay. And then do you have recommendations on organizations or programs for prototype development or funding opportunities for our public safety solutions?
Gigi, I think that might be you, buddy.
So I'm not clear whether it's the prototype the products for the challenges or prototype for to commercially launch the product for the FirstNet. That clarification, to participate in the FirstNet ecosystem, like commercially launch it on the FirstNet network. Either way, our two network has some links and resources where you can get some information on that one.
Okay, and then we didn't have any more questions. The last one just said that for the Commanding Tech Challenge, contestants are not able to get feedback from the FirstNet Authority while the challenge is going. That was just a little FYI from Sarah.
And this is Sunny. I have a question for the FirstNet team. And I was looking at one of the slides that went by, and there was mention of price points for devices. And for the first challenge in particular, our competitors have various types of approaches that they're looking at. And one of the most frequent questions I get from teams is, what should our price point be for this product? So I know that slide was meant as generic kind of pricing kind of guidelines from your work. But in terms of first challenge, are there ways that these teams should be thinking about how to price their product and how to sell it into this market? And I know there's probably not a direct answer to that question, but I do feel like raising that issue because it comes up so frequently in our discussions with teams.
Yeah, I think if we can prognosticate that one on, we'll be millionaires, because it'll hit everybody's market. It's a tough one, and it kind of again it's that perception of value along the way. If I understand, you guys are having engagements with different public safety agencies, and maybe have some of that discussion about what budgets are like, budget cycles are like. We've heard from different groups that if their IT department is purchasing the device, then a certain budget cycle is expected. And if it's being bought out of the radio shop, a different type of budget cycle happens, both for amount of money that becomes available and how often it becomes available. So as you start thinking about some of those things, you might have that conversation about how it might be procured through these different agencies and the utility of it. Again, particularly as we're getting into these kind of forward-leaning type procurements, and it's not something that teams are traditionally used to getting, buying in the field day to day. It becomes its own animal because they're used to buying radios every several years. They're now getting used to the tempo of buying phones every several years. These brand new technologies, you need to be thinking about how it's bringing value to the organization and saving money in different areas as people are starting to purchase these technologies, particularly as it becomes more expensive. You have to be they're showing value by relieving either operational utility or operational challenges in the field, or relieving some kind of other cost pressures that the agency is receiving. So that's a real nebulous response to say, kind of think about the whole picture when you guys are hitting some of those price points. And I'm happy to kind of get into some of the details with the teams, if we're allowed now, about what we put into the discrete choice model and how it might compare to some of the things they're thinking about, where we landed at that kind of $299 to $599 kind of range from the information that we had posed to the teams. Hopefully that was a good non-answer for you.
Yeah, I didn't expect an answer, but I felt like I should ask it because I know that it's a common question, and just having, I think your answer is pretty parallel to what I hear and tell folks as well, is that, it's going to take some exploration with the market and talking to these organizations to understand what price points work.
Yep, so we don't have any more questions, but we do have someone that had a comment that there are grant resources for innovators listed on the R2 network as well. So thank you for that. But other than that, there are no other questions right now. Okay, well, I think if there's no more questions, we could go ahead and end the webinar.
Great. Thanks, Haley, and thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Big thanks to FirstNET Authority for hosting this webinar with us.
Thank you.